everyone. So I've got two fabulous guests to talk to this afternoon. So two of Europe's most visionary founders, Markus and Boyan. But before we get into the chat and me grilling you politely and nicely grilling you with some questions, I want to check who is in the room, because I want to shape this conversation for you. Now, given we have two founders here, I have to ask who among you is a founder? I like the guy at the front. 2 hands. I am a founder. OK, and anyone here interested or thinking about building something, starting a company? OK, this is a good mix. This is a good mix. So quick reminder before an introduction to both, but there is going to be a QR code somewhere behind me at some point. So you are able to ask your own questions. I've got 2 iPads for the job on stage today. So fire them at me, and I'm going to try and weave those into the conversation as well. Something will pop up, grab it, I'll make sure it comes up again too. But to start with, a little introduction. So, Bolt, I mean, very famous. It's Estonian born and bred. It's everywhere when I land at the airport. Markus, would you mind just doing a brief introduction?
Sure. Hey, everybody. Markus Villig, founder and CEO of Bolt. It's now been 11 years since I started the business in Tallinn, going on the streets one by one, recruiting taxi drivers. And we've come a long way since then. So by now, we're by far the biggest European mobility platform. We have more than 200 million customers across 50 countries, about 4,000 employees. And the business continues doing really well, but I think it's just getting started. So we'll talk about that, I think, in the next minutes to come. But I think that even though it's been an exciting space for the last 10 years, I think most of the work and the actual revolution is still ahead of us for the next 2 decades.
Fantastic, thank you. And Boyan, same question. Can you do a little intro?
Yeah, so Boyan Slat, I'm the founder and CEO of the Ocean Cleanup, where our mission is to rid the world's oceans of plastic. Founded 12 years ago, so it's actually slightly older. Yeah, I guess we'll get to precisely what we do in a bit. But now we're basically just stopping about 2% of global plastic emissions, and expect to complete our mission to rid the world's oceans of plastic in about a decade from now.
Fantastic. Now, just to confirm, how old were you both when you started your companies?
I was quite old already. I was 19 when I started Bolt.
19, really ancient, classic age to start a company.
That is
and
old,
Boyan,
actually.
Yeah?
I was 18, actually.
There we go, right. So he's got you beat.
Yeah.
He's got you beat. So, just to take you back to when you were already old at 19, what was the spark? What was it that led to the creation of Bolt? Take us back to the roots.
So for me, it's actually a bit of an unusual story, because I wanted to be a tech entrepreneur as long as I can remember. So I was probably 7, 8 years old when I realized I'm very interested in technology. I'm interested in business and thinking, how do you apply technology to change the world and then make lives better for millions of people? And I was truly a believer that you can do that through capitalism. So you can really figure out a way that it can be a sustainable business and it can have a positive impact at the world. And in my mind, those things have never been in conflict. And then as a teenager, I learned to code. I started building websites, started building first startups and experimenting around. Those didn't code too well, but I think I took some valuable lessons from that. And then when I was 19 and all my class was studying for the high school exams, then I think I was arrogant enough to think that I don't need to do that, and I'd rather start building a company instead. So I took most of my last 12th grade and started preparing for Bolt, going on the streets, signing up taxi drivers, organizing online surveys, asking people if they would want to use a service like this, and just started building the first prototype. So it was very, very humble beginnings.
Yeah, OK. Boyan, I have to ask the same question. What was the initial spark that led to the creation of the Ocean Cleanup?
Yeah, so something I think fascinated by technology really since, and just building things since I think pretty young age. So I think I built my first chair to sit on when I was 2 years old, just with wood and nails. Then sort of started building my own computers, building explosives and things like that when I was 8.
How old with the explosives?
9 years old.
Okay, cool.
Which wasn't my mom's favorite phase.
I was going to say.
At one point in time, I almost burned down the house, but I won't get into that. Then when I was around 12, I wanted to set a Guinness World Record launching more than 200 small rockets at the same time. I actually succeeded in that, 213 I launched, which wasn't very useful, but I was never bored, essentially. Yeah. And then I was 16, I went scuba diving in Greece, and I came across more plastic bags than fish, and I wondered, why can't we just clean this up? And then that's when I kind of started thinking about this, and I then started studying aerospace engineering, but after half a year, I was just so obsessed by this idea that I decided to drop out and start the ocean cleanup. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I recently became a mother, and you talking about explosives at the age of 8 is filling me with fear.
Get ready. Yeah.
So you're both in your own way tackling global challenges. Talk me through your mindset a little bit, right? In tackling what each of you are tackling. How do you stay focused, particularly with an organization now that's 4,000 people, how do you stay focused on the mission that you initially set out to solve with Bolt?
So it is reminding me all the time that in a big company, if you want people to stay focused on what's important, it takes a lot of repetition. So even though I think that I've said something a few times, I realize I oftentimes have to say it another few dozen times, so actually everybody understands it, that that's truly the goal. But that's obviously very different in a large company versus when we got started. So when we got started, it was very simple. We just wanted to build something that people would love to use. And we, of course, had a long-term vision that we wanted to replace private car ownership and build a much better alternative that would be more sustainable, more convenient, more affordable. And we're going to be covering all different modes of transportation to do that. But in the early days, it was very simple. It was like, how do we just make it simple for you to order a cab and have a great app where you have good selection, good pickup times, good prices. And we didn't really emphasize the mission too much. But now as the business is bigger and bigger, you have more people, it's more and more important that you just constantly repeat that to people so they wouldn't get lost and start optimizing for the wrong things. Because oftentimes in a big company, people might be starting to optimize for how do I make more profits here and sacrificing the customer benefits and so on. So it's really key that you constantly keep that North Star really visible for people, that we're here to make cities better and we're not here just to optimize for short-term profitability, which isn't good for anyone at the end of the day.
Yeah. Boyan, I know that you have a video that you would like to share.
I guess we could. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So maybe just to give a sense of what we do. So we basically do two things to clean the ocean. So on one hand, we are stopping more plastic from going into the ocean. And on the other hand, we're also cleaning up what's already in the ocean. So maybe just start with the last thing. So this infamous Great Pacific Garbage Patch, that's really where most of the plastic that's currently in the ocean has accumulated. So we built this 2.5 kilometer long system through a lot of trial and error, but we got that to work. And it's been cleaning up an area the size of a football field every 5 seconds. And maybe if we can play the ocean video first, and then. So this is every few days you do an extraction, and then this is the kind of stuff you get out.
Wow.
So that's one half of the good, and then the other side, of course, we have to stop more plastic from entering the ocean. So we also put devices in rivers we call interceptors to catch it before it can reach the ocean, because otherwise we have to keep cleaning forever. I'll show you a clip of a river in Guatemala, which actually is, we think used to be the heaviest polluting river on Earth, contributing more plastic to the world's oceans than North America, Europe, Japan, and Korea combined. So about 1% of global plastic emissions comes from this one river. So if we show the river video. And this happens, so this is 272 truckloads in 2 hours. And this can happen up to 3 times a week, actually, there. And what we found is that just 1% of the world's rivers is responsible for about 80% of all the plastic that goes to the oceans. So by tackling that 1% of rivers, we think that's the fastest and most cost-effective way to get the oceans clean again and stop this stuff from going in.
I have to ask, because first of all, when I was watching those videos, my mind literally went, wow, that is fucking insane. Once you've actually cleaned it out, where does it go?
Yeah.
What do you do with it all?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's big volumes, right? I think so far we've removed about 27 million kilos of trash.
Yeah.
And of course, our ethos is to guarantee that everything we take out never ends up back into the environment. So kind of a big part of setting up these projects is actually ensuring that we have the good ecosystem. So it's not just about the system itself, but it's really about the system around the system, so that the government, the operator, so the local party doing the cleanup, and the waste management are all set up for success. And it really depends on the local available infrastructure. So when it comes to the stuff we take out of the ocean, we really, because of the nature of the plastic, we can recycle everything. And some of our corporate partners, like Kia, some of the plastic has ended up in their new electric cars. The latest record from Coldplay is actually made from our plastic as well. So some of it can be recycled, and what can't be recycled, we make sure that it's safely stored in either, mostly in landfills in those countries.
Can anything be recycled into things we might be using with Bolt?
I mean,
well, luckily or unluckily, I think most of the vehicles we produce, which is hundreds of thousands of scooters, have very little plastic components. So we think that it actually makes a lot of sense to try to make them as much out of metal as possible, which is generally just lasts longer and easier to recycle.
Okay.
So we try to contribute to the problem as little as we can.
yeah.
Good. So Boyan, just thinking about, you started with oceans, realized rivers, obviously a massive problem, have to build the interceptor. Just to take you back to sort of being, 18-year-old Boyan and building this and to where you are now, how have you adapted over time, right? As you've scaled and grown, what's shifted for you personally, looking at the mission and mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a CEO, your job is to figure out what needs to happen and then make sure that it happens, right? It's a pretty simple job description. And over time, it changed a lot, right? Because I think normally with many companies, you really have a commercialization challenge, right? So there's this idea, this technology, and can you make that into a viable business? Of course, in our case, there was still this hard tech layer underneath that of how on earth do we even do this, right? So we basically had to spend about 8 years before we actually had solutions that worked. So that was like a layer. And then actually the first layer was when we started, we figured, actually, nobody understands this problem in the first place. Like, people don't know where the plastic is, how much plastic is in this Great Pacific Garbage Patch, where is it coming from? So actually, we essentially started out as a research institute, just hired scientists. So the first 3-4 years was just about producing papers and mapping this problem. So using AI-powered cameras in rivers and on ships to kind of map this whole thing. So it's been really, of course, within that I had to adapt to provide the right leadership through all these phases. And I think, I think to me made it so interesting to work on. It's not just doing the same thing all the time, but it's like using different parts of your brain throughout the day.
Yeah. So obviously you both started your businesses incredibly young. It's sickening how young you both were in a very positive, helpful way. But sorry, I say this as I'm selfish. I'm 36 and I'm like, what the hell have I done? But taking you back to being 18 and 19, and Markus, I'll turn to you here. As a 19-year-old, you don't really know a lot, right? There's a lot of stuff that you need to learn, and you've got to bring in experts to surround you. And I feel like this would be helpful to potential builders in the room and founders. What were some of those first steps that you took to find the experts that could help you along your journey?
We were actually just discussing this last evening as well, and I realized that Bolt's journey and my journey in that sense has been quite rare or unique, that when I talk to most other successful CEOs who are running companies of this scale, they've oftentimes been able to get great mentors on board or sort of board members on board who've been helping them along the way. And I think we've really not had that. So effectively, we've been sort of forced, me and the executive team, to learn as we go along, mainly by Googling a lot, reading books, reading blogs, and just a lot of experimentation. And I think there's specific reasons why we didn't have that. I mean, one was that we actually didn't raise money from traditional venture capitalists until the business was at a very late stage. So again, I mean, one can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing, but that's the reality. So the first 5-6 years, we had to figure things out on the go on our own. We didn't really have experienced investors or executives to bring on board who could help us. And I think that, as a result, then means that Bolt ended up with a bit different organizational culture and design than I think a lot of other traditional companies in tech are. And overall, now, would I recommend that to anybody else? Not really necessarily. I mean, it's obviously much tougher if you have to figure out everything on your own. But on the other hand, if you like to have a lot of control over things and like to make up your own mind, then it's also a very nice position to be in. So looking back, I wouldn't change anything.
Nice. So I've just switched iPads to check on questions coming through. So a reminder, if you do want to ask questions, please send them over. There's one statement on here. It's not a question, but I thought I'd share it because it's quite nice. Congratulations on Bolt.
Thank you.
And looking forward to welcoming you to lead the logistics in food medicine delivery and moving people of India. Have we expanded to India?
Not there yet, but also nothing to announce at the moment, but keenly looking at the market, let's say.
Okay. So I'm going to ask this question, Markus, and then I would also really love, Boyan, for you to chip in on this as well. If you started a new business today, what would be the things that you would do differently compared to when you first started launching Bolt?
I'd probably put even more attention on hiring and making sure you get the best team as quickly as you can. Because when I look back at the last 11 years, the biggest failures we made, the biggest frustrations I've lived through and sort of caused the most stress are usually been people problems. So it hasn't been anything else really, but it's that we don't either have the right talent, so the existing team gets burned out or overloaded, or it's been that we've hired the wrong person who just isn't the perfect fit for the role, either because of culture or because of competencies. And time and time again, I'm just reminded that you have to invest a lot of time into hiring to get the best people to join. Because again, by nature, I mean, the best people are usually very happily employed somewhere else. So it takes a lot of effort to find them and get them to join and get excited by our mission. And if I had to change one thing, I would make sure I put even more time into that and make sure that's an integral part of the company culture for every manager we have.
Okay. Boyan, I've got to ask the same one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be quite similar, honestly. Like, you know, your company is your people, right? So I think especially leadership position. I think nonprofits are kind of uniquely, it's like a uniquely problematic situation because first of all, I mean, you know, there is no stock, so you can't, there's like a, stock, I think, is a great tool to align incentives, right? And so I think there you're already kind of behind. And then I don't know how it is here in the Baltic States, but at least in the part of Europe where I am, there's very much this culture of, you know, if you see like executives from a non-profit earning a lot of money, people are very like, there's kind of a negative stigma associated with that because like, oh, why do you do good? Aren't you motivated by the mission? Like you're just stealing money or something like that. So definitely initially we were like paying very badly, and then you just either get people very early in your career that are just excited to do anything, or very late in their career. But kind of this middle ground was kind of a challenge to tap into. So at some point in time, we figured like actually, do we want to be sort of righteous and all that, or do we actually want to make sure we have the best people? Like, what's better for the ocean? And then we decide, okay, actually, we need to get the best people in. And but definitely, looking back, there's so many sleepless nights and headaches that I could have just avoided by getting, a better team in early. So I would say that, and then secondly, something I would have done differently is, I think so obviously, kind of trial by error was kind of the path to get here as well. So made a lot of mistakes, we like to refer to them as unscheduled learning opportunities, but which are, they're essential. And even if you have people that give you advice, somehow these lessons stick better if you live them yourself. So, it's just a part of the game. But I think what's important is like you must try things and go through those failures, but make sure those failures are as fast and cheap as possible. So, our first ocean system, we towed it out. It was a 10 million system. It took a year to build, and it didn't collect plastic, which is an important requirement for an ocean cleanup system. And within 3 months, it broke into two. And looking back, it's like, okay, we learned a lot from it, but probably we could have learned the same thing if we would have made the system maybe 20% of the size, and we could have launched it in a month. And so it's about, accept that you're going to fail. Don't assume it's going to, because we had such belief that this one system was going to succeed. So, and I guess that's kind of the MVP mindset, right? But it's keep your failures cheap. That's something I would do differently.
Yeah. I guess from where you both start, being 18 and 19, attitude, energy-wise, there must have been a sense of I can't fail, right? Like the vision, the drive that you have, particularly with the energy that you have at that age as well. Given that there are failures and everything along the way, how did you each individually, personally, kind of look after yourselves? Because there's a the size of the organizations that you've built, the missions that you've got, there's quite a bit of pressure you're putting on yourselves as well. And building a company is hard. So, Markus, how do you look after yourself?
What I found over the last 11 years is that people don't get burned out by working hard. They get burned out by a lack of results. And time again, I've seen it both with myself and the team around me that if everything is going well in the business, people never count their hours. Mm-hmm. Like, people are usually very happy to put in a lot of time, long evenings, even on the weekends. If there's something that's super exciting and they see that every day their work is actually changing the world and everything is moving in the right direction, I've never seen any team who's in that mode actually ever be really worried about burning out. And on the flip side of that, I've seen teams who don't actually put in that much hours, but they just see that they're not seeing the progress that they would like to get. There's sort of failure or a problem after another problem, and they're just constantly being weighed down by this negativity. And I think that's what kills motivation and sort of energy levels a lot more than simply the work hours. So I think we got to frame that as managers and understand it, that like at the end of the day, people need to have a balance of positive and negative news. That's positive side, right? So if you constantly only get negative news, then just people are not going to be very excited and stay for long. And on a personal level, I found it the same, right? So that at the end of the day, I always try to mix up so that my weeks and months would have always something positive as well. So if I get as a CEO probably 20 bad news a week, then I try to find at least some corners of positivity that would cheer me up and sort of get me more energy to come back reinvigorated the next day. And other than that, I just say that take care of the basics. I still see so many founders and employees who just make the mistake of not doing the basics right. Like, they don't sleep well, don't eat well, don't exercise, don't take any time off to do something else outside of work. And that's just so stupid. Like, you just burn yourself out in a couple of months and your performance starts to degrade. And that's no way to build a long-lasting company.
Yeah. Boyan, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I mean, obviously agree with all of that. And I think it's also just about approaching problems in a rational way. Like after we had that massive failure, and actually we're super close to running out of money at that point, and our big funders, they were kind of hesitant to give more just after that failure. But then we could have just been very stressed, but then we looked at the problems and thought like, okay, has the need to solve this problem gotten any smaller because of this failure? It's like, no. Okay, well, in that case, we should just keep going, right? So I think that's been important. And of course, trying to keep a team motivated, a team that joins you because they want to clean the ocean. And then for 8 years, we were not cleaning the ocean, right? Because it took until 2021 until these solutions actually worked. Yeah, I mean, that was a challenge. But of course, it's indeed like trying to find the little successes and celebrating those, even if it's like, a tiny lab test or whatever. I think it's important because people need to see that their work matters.
Yeah. So we've got not very long left, so I'm going to make sure we get a question in related to raising funding, right? So you've got the idea, you're building, you realize that maybe you need venture capital to help you along the way, or you need to raise money for a not-for-profit.
I think our answers will be very different on
I think they will be.
Question,
So let's start with venture capital, because there are a lot of investors here today. How did you, just talk me through what that looked like back when you were starting Bolt and you're trying to convince people to take a chance on you?
Horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we had a lot of trouble raising money. Over the first 5 years, we barely raised anything, to be honest. I mean, we raised like $1.5 million of local angel funding effectively here. And then we had to bootstrap with that. So it was really tough times. And I've told this story, I think, especially to the Estonian audience many times. But we were basically raising money from whoever we could. Like that included local real estate companies, railway companies, Czech telecom, like completely random investors. So there wasn't anybody who would recognize as a big name VC. And the reason for it is that I think they were all too smart. I think they had all bought into this paradigm that they had like a very robust intellectual framework for thinking through that this industry is going to be dominated by one company, and therefore it doesn't make sense to bet on anybody else. It's a winner-take-all dynamic. And they just all kept believing that for 4 or 5 years. It was just like complete herd mentality. So I talked to dozens of VCs and nobody wanted to touch us. And then obviously like 5 years went by, the business got to a level where it was doing like 10 million euros of annual revenue, growing super nicely. At some point, Uber basically self-destructed. And then, obviously then VCs came to us and wanted to invest a lot of money. And then we raised $1.5 billion in a few years. So guess what? Sometimes it takes you a long time to convince the world that everybody else is stupid. So.
If there's one quote from today. So, Boyan, like you said, very different, raising for not-for-profit.
Yeah. My advice would be don't start a non-profit. It's like, that's like, just don't. Look, I think if you can solve a problem in a for-profit way, it's just going to be, you got the wind of capitalism in your sales. It's much easier. The problem, of course, is that there's a lot of value in this world that is outside of the economy, right? So, for example, the ocean provides roughly 60 trillion a year of value. The global economy is about 125 trillion a year, right? So obviously, most of that 60 trillion is not captured in our economic system, right? So like if the ocean would be on someone's balance sheet, it's like, okay, easy, right? But unfortunately, it's not. So that's really why when we started, it was clear, it's going to take quite a lot of a long road to get to this stuff to work. So it's going to require, basically hundreds of millions to make this get to the point of scale up. And even once you're there, it's not like there's some obvious, business model there. So then, really, the conclusion was, okay, the only way we could get this done is as a nonprofit. And then, but the way we approached the fundraising was, I think, more analogous to kind of the for-profit world than what nonprofits usually do. I think usually nonprofits treat their donations as revenue, and we treated it as investment. So essentially, we we worked in rounds, and we basically raised some money, initially with crowdfunding. Then we got to the next milestone. We raised the next round with like high net worth individuals. So the path was actually, it was of course, in a non-for-profit space, but I think the analogy there was that by doing it that way, in the meantime, we could really focus on execution. I think many non-profit founders are just fundraising all the time, and I think you actually have to build a company as well, right? It allowed us to be, I think, quite successful in getting what we needed. And I think now we're really getting to the point that there's corporate partnerships, tens of millions of dollars in terms of deal value, because now we have this, this story and this brand which is valuable from a marketing perspective from companies to come in. So we really, you have these different waves of different types of funders that we went through. It's not been particularly easy. I'm
sure.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'm getting eyes off the stage, which means by taking more time, I'm being naughty. But I am going to ask one really quick question. So final closing thoughts, one sentence. You have to give a piece of advice to the young founders or the founders in the room, something you wish you'd known when you started out, and you get one sentence. What would it be?
Trust your own judgment.
And a lot of people are stupid. Yep. Boyan?
Work on something that matters. This is a big part of your life, and you got like 80,000 hours, I think, in your working life on average. Make them matter.
Make them matter.
Yeah.
That's a very wonderful note to end on. Both of you, thank you very much for joining me on stage today. Round of applause, please.
Yeah.